It's Sunday, September 8th, day 338 of the October 7th War, an emotional and dramatic week in Israel. We'll hear the latest briefing from Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, and then perspective from noted philosopher and author Bernard-Henri Lévy. Keeping you up to date, I'm Michael Dixon, and this is Special Briefing from Stand With Us. Shalom from Israel. A week on, we are still reeling from the news that the bodies of 6 murdered hostages were recovered from Hamas terrorist captivity in Gaza. They were found in a terror tunnel in Rafah. Alexander Lubanov was working at the bar at the Nova Festival when the Hamas massacre began. His wife Michal was 5 months pregnant at the time and has since given birth to their second child. Executed by Hamas at age 33, he never got to meet his baby. 23-year-old Hirsch Goldberg Polin was at the Nova Festival with friends when the October 7th massacre began. He sought refuge in a roadside shelter, but terrorists soon arrived, throwing grenades and shooting inside. One grenade severely injured Hirsch, resulting in the loss of a large portion of his arm. His parents joined us on this show and spoke lovingly about Hirsch, and like all the hostage families, they never stopped fighting for his release. Carmel Gat was an occupational therapist from Tel Aviv, visiting her parents in Kibbutz Be'eri when the terrorist massacre began. Her mother was murdered by Hamas terrorists, and her sister-in-law, Yarden Roman Gat, was also taken hostage, but released in November. Carmel was just 40 years old. Ori Danino was at the Nova Festival when the Hamas massacre began. He was helping to rescue people, filling his car to the maximum. He'd returned to the party to rescue more partygoers when he was kidnapped. He was engaged to Liel. Ori was 25. 27-year-old Almog Sarusi was at the Nova Festival with his girlfriend, Shachar, who was murdered in the Hamas massacre. His family was mistakenly informed twice that his body had been found, but he was later confirmed to have been kidnapped to Gaza. And last week, they received the final awful news. Eden Yerushalmi was at the Nova Festival when the massacre began. She hid in the bushes near the party for hours, staying on her phone with her sister until she reported that the terrorists had seen her, which ultimately led to her being taken hostage in Gaza. She was 24, and authorities revealed that her rescued body was severely starved. Hirsch, Ori, Almog, Alexander, Eden, Carmel. We will never forget you, nor ever forgive Hamas for their barbarity towards you. There are now 66 hostages presumed to be alive, held by Hamas in Gaza now for 11 months, and 35 bodies that they're holding captive. They must release every one of them. May the memories of those we've lost be a blessing, and may their families be comforted among the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. In a moment, we'll get the latest security briefing with Jonathan Conricus. But first, the news headlines from last week at war. Thousands of people from across Israel gathered to pay their final respects to the 6 hostages whose bodies were finally laid to rest after being recovered from Gaza, just days after Hamas terrorists murdered them in captivity. 3 Israeli police officers were brutally murdered in a stabbing and shooting terror attack at the Tarkmia crossing. A manhunt for the terrorists is still ongoing. Additionally, a car loaded with explosives was found near Ateret. Thanks to the alertness of a local civilian, a major attack was thwarted. It had been reported that the target for these explosives was a local children's bus. The attacks occurred as Israeli security forces continue their ongoing counter-terrorism operations against Palestinian terror groups in areas like Jenin, where an explosives lab was hidden under a mosque, was found and destroyed. Israel remains on high alert as terror threats by Palestinian terrorists continue to pose a danger against innocent Israeli civilians. Israel commemorated 11 months since the atrocities of October the 7th in southern Israeli communities, in which Hamas terrorists slaughtered thousands of civilians and kidnapped hundreds of innocent people into Gaza. The situation in the north continues to escalate, with hundreds of rockets and missiles fired by Hezbollah terrorists from Lebanon at Israeli communities this past week alone. Reports indicate that the IDF is preparing for a substantial offensive against the terror group. Meanwhile, multiple buildings in northern Israel continue to sustain heavy damage, with large fires erupting as Hezbollah attacks continue on a daily basis. Multiple shots were fired near the Israeli consulate in Munich, Germany. The horrific attack occurred as the Jewish community and the people of Israel commemorated exactly 52 years to the day since the Munich Olympic massacre that took the lives of 11 Israeli athletes. The terrorist who opened fire was reportedly an Austrian citizen, likely of Bosnian Muslim origins, who entered Germany recently. He arrived at the area armed with a long rifle from World War II manufactured by Nazi Germany. He was killed by the officers and no further injuries were reported. And finally, the Israeli delegation to the Paris 2024 Paralympics continues to amaze, taking multiple Olympic medals in rowing, swimming, goalball, and tennis. Israeli rower Moran Samuel won the gold medal. Rowers Shachar Milfelder and Saleh Shachin won bronze. And Israeli swimmer Ami Dadaon took 4 medals, 2 golds, 1 silver, and a bronze. Israeli tennis player Guy Sasson won bronze, and the Israeli goalball team 1 silver. Mazal tov to all the athletes. Joining us live now is our friend, former international spokesman for the IDF and senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us from New York.
Thank you for having me, Michael. A pleasure.
And here we are 11 months on this weekend. I came back from Hirsch's Shiva this week and reflected on what strong people his parents are, John and Rachel, and all the hostage families. So I wondered if I could begin with a personal question. As somebody who has stood opposite the press on issues relating to these hostages for the last 11 months, what are your personal reflections on the news of the executed hostages?
Yeah, you're touching on what I think is the most difficult topic, issue, challenge, and moral mountain that we have to face and to overcome. I have, like so many other Israelis, a personal connection as well. There's a body of a former friend of mine who served in the IDF together, is being held by Hamas. I know that Asaf Hamami, he was killed on October the 7th, and his body is still being held. And of course, like so many other Israelis, I feel strongly, personally connected to this issue. It's not only personal, but it's a matter of national pride, our reputation. The way that that the news hit me was that I was extremely saddened to hear about it. I was so frustrated by thinking that they endured 320 days of hell under earth in Hamas captivity, and then once they maybe had a chance of getting rescued by Israeli soldiers, Hamas executed them in cold blood and ended their suffering, but also ended the chances of them coming back home. That maybe was the most frustrating and the most difficult thing, because it felt as if we were close to saving them. And that is heartbreaking. I cannot imagine what the families feel. I don't want to even try to imagine what they're feeling now and what the families of 101 hostages are still feeling. I can only say that I understand them, I love them, I support them. I am with them in their quest to get their loved ones home. And the saddest thing is that we're dealing with extremely brutal terrorists that are happy to capitalize on each and every expression of emotion in Israel, and they're happy to use that for their leverage, and that's an extremely sad thing. But I support the families, and I hope and pray that we see the loved ones back home in Israel.
What do we know about where they were found?
Well, we know that they were held underground. We know that the location was within less than a kilometer of where the Israeli Bedouin man, Al-Kiyan, was held for the most part of his captivity. We know that it's one of the outlying neighborhoods of of Rafah, borderline Khan Yunis and Rafah. And we know that Israeli troops had been around that location for quite a few times. We also know that they were kept there at guard, and that their Hamas, the ones that the Hamas guards who were keeping them in prison there, executed them upon orders from Hamas and then escaped the area as they heard IDF approaching.
And so, does anything now change about the way the IDF conducts its military operations in Gaza? What should we expect as next stages?
Yeah, I think what changes is that Hamas is really looking at what's happening in Israel, the public outcry, the protests, and the political turmoil, and really benefiting from all of it. And I think strengthening their bargaining position. They're seeing the very genuine, authentic outpouring of support for the hostage families in Israel, and they're translating it to political gain and advantage in the negotiations. What we're not seeing is significant pressure applied on Hamas, neither through Qatar, neither through the Egyptians or Turkey. They're basically being allowed to continue to hold Israeli hostages, and they're not paying a price for it. And what we're seeing on the ground is continued IDF activity, but what I've heard and seen is that the IDF is very, very extremely careful not to operate in areas where it thinks that there might be hostages, in order not to trigger a similar event unknowingly, whereby Israeli troops will be maneuvering in an area and then Hamas will execute them out of fear of Israelis being close in order to rescue them.
And in the meantime, of course, the psychological terror from Hamas continues with the release of videotapes of the hostages. We should expect that to continue, I guess.
Definitely. We should expect them to continue, and we should expect them to continue to feed the political turnout in Israel. They want to see demonstrations. They want to see backlash. They want to see, they want to harbor, to use the sorrow and outpouring of emotions on Israeli streets. That is exactly what they want. And they will continue to drip feed Israelis with this poison, with these rigged and edited videos of our 6 murdered hostages. They will continue to do that. They've already released 2, and I think that they will release the additional 4, and they will do it in parts, and they will make it the most excruciating and the most painful for the families in order to trigger maximum emotions in Israel, in order to strengthen Hamas's hand in the negotiations.
And in the meantime, a lot of focus has turned to the Philadelphia corridor. Can you explain the significance of it? And would Israel be able to give up control on it for any period of time?
Yeah, Philadelphia is an important place, but the most important thing is what happens underground. And what I find missing from Israeli communications and the press briefing that the Prime Minister gave was the actual plan to stop the tunnels, because it's not enough to control the border itself above ground. What Israel needs to do, in my mind, is a serious engineering effort, and basically to make it impossible for Hamas to dig any more tunnels and to use the ones that already exist. That, as far as I know, isn't in the making yet. And in my mind, that needs to happen. And that will apply a lot of pressure on everybody, on Hamas and on Hamas supporters in Cairo. And it will impress upon Hamas a real urgency, because they will see their assets being taken away. If you ask me a military question, is Philadelphia important? Unequivocally, yes. Are the tunnels absolutely critical for Hamas and its ability to rebuild itself the day after? Also, clearly, yes. Is it negotiable? I think it is negotiable, but that's more of a political and a strategic question. But I think that Israel, with its current military capabilities, can take into account the different events and be flexible. And with the ultimate, I think, what I think should be the number one goal of getting hostages back, see how it can be flexible and smart and cunning, but apply pressure on Hamas to get what we want, and that is the hostages. But very importantly, is to start digging and to start taking away the tunnels from Hamas. Unless we do that, sitting on top of Philadelphia has very little importance.
And of course, it would require Hamas to agree to a ceasefire deal, which up until now it has not. Let's turn our attention for a moment to northern Israel. We've seen consistent rocket attacks on the north of Israel. Are we closer to a full-scale war between Hezbollah and Israel?
Yeah, every day that goes by, and the world, led by the US and a few other countries, France, perhaps the UK and Germany, every day that goes by, and there's no diplomatic urgency to de escalate the situation, push Hezbollah away from the border, and allow 70,000 Israelis to return safely to their homes without the fear of an October 7 style attack against them. Every day that goes by brings us one day closer to an all-out escalation, which would be difficult for Israel, devastating for Lebanon, and could be really dangerous for the region. And I think that anybody that is talking about and giving lip service about preventing escalation should be really, really busy with preventing it through diplomacy and applying pressure on Hezbollah through the Lebanese state, through Iran, and through other backers in order to move Hezbollah back. Every day that they are close to the Israeli border is a day that we are pushed inevitably closer to an all-out confrontation between Israel and Hezbollah.
And it's a confrontation that the IDF is drilling for, of course. The IDF is also currently in the middle of a large-scale counterterrorism operation in the West Bank, in Judea and Samaria. Can you explain the significance of this operation?
Well, it's a long overdue operation that so far has been very successful in attacking the infrastructure of various Palestinian terror organizations in Judea and Samaria. So far, it has focused on Tulkarem, Jenin, and Nablus to a lesser extent. And what it's basically doing is dealing with an imminent live threat of the use of vehicle bombs. In the military, we call it vehicle-borne IEDs, VBIEDs. We've seen 5 of them in the last 3 weeks dispatched towards Israeli targets. Fortunately, they haven't been successful, but the bottom line is that we're seeing the evolution of growing threats in Judea and Samaria against Israeli civilian and military targets. This operation that the IDF is doing now is the first and definitely not the least attempt to undermine the infrastructure of these organizations. But here, just like what we discussed with Philadelphia and Gaza, we have to address the root cause. The thing that allows Palestinian terrorist organizations to keep on projecting and killing Israelis and threatening to kill Israelis is the fact that we don't have a good control over the Israeli-Jordanian border. And it's an open, porous border. Weapons are getting in, and the Iranians are smuggling these weapons from Syria into Jordan and then into Judea and Samaria, specifically Samaria, which is the northern part of the West Bank. And that is really the fuel behind these attacks. And once we cut that line, then terrorist organizations, they might be very ideologically strong against Israel, but if they won't have weapons, they won't be able to execute significant attacks. And that is what Israel now is also starting to dismantle.
And finally, what's your message at this time to our Stand With Us audience about what they can do and the message they should be putting out to their contacts and networks right now?
Yeah, so I'm in New York because I'm starting a speaking tour with Stand With Us here on the Eastern Coast. We're going to be in New York, in Philadelphia, and in Florida. It's going to be great. We're going to meet lots of audiences and speak at different locations. I will tell you here the same message that I will speak with Stand With Us audiences here. It is that we still have our work cut out for us. There's a lot of enemies who are eager and dreaming about destroying Israel and killing Jews. We have to fight them. We have to be strong, resilient, and steadfast. We have to stay our course. We have to be united and focus on the most important things, and that is to defeat our enemies and get our people home and to deter possible enemies from attacking us. We have to do that by being strong in Israel, but also by working together with other democracies, other countries, first and foremost the US. And in order to do so, Israel needs the support of anybody that supports Israel in the US and around the world. And that is American Jews and good Americans who see that Israel is on the side of democracy and on the side of light. So my message is, we still have to fight a long way. We need help to do it. Israel is strong, and at the end of this fight, we will win.
And I know that many people will be Looking forward to seeing you in person. You can catch Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus on his tour with Stand With Us in the Northeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Southeast United States. You can look at standwithus.com for more details. In the meantime, thank you so much for your perspective and your insight today. Safe travels, my friend. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shabbat tov.
Important analysis. Now, it's hard to believe, but we're coming up to a year since October 7th, and at the Stand With Us Cats Education Center here in Jerusalem, we'll be hosting an incredible exhibition of portraits of those who were lost at the Nova Festival and those who were murdered on October the 7th, as well as our brave fallen soldiers. The art is created by celebrated Israeli graffiti artist Bentzi Bronfman, who survived the Nova Festival, and it documents and perpetuates the memory of those who have been lost since October the 7th. The portraits were created with the permission and in collaboration with the families of the hostages and those who were murdered, and will also feature an incredible immersive VR experience showcasing what it was like on October the 7th. This is all happening in Jerusalem. Take a look. A very powerful experience. The exhibition runs in Jerusalem from September the 24th until October the 30th. For information and booking, please go to standwithus.com, and the full URL is on the screen right now. Now, our next guest is a French philosopher known the world over. He's director of 8 films and the author of 48 books. He's one of the West's foremost intellectuals, defending democracy and humanism against totalitarianism and fascism. Joining us from Paris is Bernard-Henri Lévy. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
What inspired you to write your book, Israel Alone, at this specific moment in history?
The wish to help, and the wish to help young people, young Jews, young friends of Israel, to defend Israel in an unapologetic way, in a proud way. I think that there is no reason to be apologetic, no reason to excuse oneself. And I really wrote this book in order to give some sort of intellectual ammunitions for those who stand with Israel, who stand with Jews, and who stand with liberal values, which are naturally linked to Jewish thought. This is the purpose of the book.
Can you describe your personal experience on October the 7th, hearing the news, and then you immediately chose to go to Israel? Tell us a bit about that, please.
My personal experience is very simple. I heard the news on Saturday morning. I'm not a very good Shabbat follower, so I had the news early. I decided immediately in a glance to fly to Israel, and I jumped in the first available flight. It was the time where all companies in the world were canceling their flights. They were treating Israel as a sort of cursed country, a victim of a nearly blockade. In a sense, there was only El Al. So the first available El Al flight, I took it. I arrived in Sderot, in the south of Israel, on the night of the 8th. I was in Kfar Aza and Be'eri on the 10th, maybe 11. The corpses had been already removed, but there were still pieces of bodies here and there remaining, pieces unattributed, if I can say. There were still some light fights inside the kibbutz of Kfar Aza. I was there with my dear friends of Elnet, who helped me to organize that. And for me, it's an unforgettable experience to arrive in those ghost kibbutzim, like you say, a ghost city, a ghost town, to see those who escaped and to feel the presence of those who died. For me, even if I have seen a lot in my life, if I have experienced a lot in my life, this is one of the most unforgettable experience in my life.
Did you ever think that you would see the kind of sights that you ended up seeing after October the 7th? How do we reconcile this moment in history?
No, I did not think I would see that again. Number one, such a pogrom. This was unthinkable. Number two, a pogrom in Israel, in the very country which was built in order to prevent the comeback of the worst. And number three, what was maybe the most surprising is to see not a wave of support for Israel, but a wave of, I don't even dare to say, but nearly in some circles, and not only in the Muslim world, also in America, also in Europe, joy. In the following days, following October 7, you had some great professors of renowned American universities who shared videos, contents, saying that it was a great day in their life. In the very beginning, a few days before the counter-attack of Israel, you had demonstrations in the streets of New York, saying that October 7 was a fair reply to a long Israeli occupation, and so on. And the reply for me, the reply of the West, of part of the West, a large part of the West, was also unthinkable for someone like me.
And in your book, you discuss the concept of radical evil, you call it. How do you define this term, and why is it so relevant to this current situation?
Radical evil is, generally human beings commit evil with an aim, with a target. They want territory, they want political victory, they want I don't know, to steal. There is a target, there is an objective. In that case, it was evil for evil. To rape ladies in such a way, to take hostages like praise in antiquity, in the antique times, to treat hostage as they were treated, like beasts, the few images we have. All of that is meaningless. There is not any agenda, even the most cynical in the world, which can explain this, except pure cruelty, pure will to kill, and to kill in the most vile way, pure will of humiliating, killing, torturing Jews because they are Jews. And this for me is radical evil. To kill someone with no other will, no other reason than the will to kill, the joy to kill, the passion to kill, this is radical evil. It is not a very Jewish concept, by the way, radical evil. But in this case, October 7, it applies.
Yeah, and you mentioned the response globally in Europe and America and other places. And in some areas, of course, as you said, that response was strangely joy. How do we understand that? Where have we come to? How have we got to this point that such evil acts, such radical evil, as you rightly term it, can be celebrated by some?
Because we knew, I wrote on that all my life. I knew that there is a deep, old undercurrent of resentment against Jews since always. I know that. Metaphysical resentment, religious anti-Semitism, political hate, geopolitical will to eradicate Israel. I know all of that. This exists since long. I thought that it was more or less held away, that it was under control, more or less. It was not. The resentment against Jews, the pure hate, really filled the air. You saw that in the UN. The first reactions of the UN at all levels, from top to toes, from the General Secretary Gutierrez to the UNRWA, was absolutely a shame, reversing the scale, the responsibilities, accusing the Jews of having their own, the responsibles of their own martyrdom, excusing the butchers and the killers. The first reflex, it was not even a way of reflecting, of reasoning, it was a reflex. The first reflex of the UN, without thinking, was to accuse the Jews, was to say that it was well deserved. In America, immediately the first reflex of so many people was to say that the Nova party, the Nova was a provocation, because it was, how can you organize a party, a feast, a dancing party so I didn't even dare to express, but so close to the border of Gaza. This was one of the first reactions you heard in the campuses of North America and in the campuses of Europe. On the other side, you saw immediately a bright, beautiful, admirable reaction of young students, Jews, and not only, who stood firm with the victims, who stood firmly with Israel, and without shame, without self-apology. You saw that too, a reaction of courage and of truth that at the same time, for myself at least, warmed my heart.
And maybe at the base of this, do you feel there's a lack of understanding about the role that Israel plays in Jewish life? We often hear these accusations of colonialism. How do you best explain to people who may have no connection to Judaism whatsoever about what role Israel plays in the life of Jews?
I think, and I say that at length in my book, I think that we are facing here an abyss of ignorance, People don't even know. these girls and boys in the campuses, they don't even know where is Gaza. They don't even know what colonialism is. They don't even know what is the history of Israel. They don't even know that Israel is the fruit of a liberation war, the only one which has, in the last 100 years, not only succeeded but not failed after success. They don't know. So in my book, this is one of the reasons why you asked me at the beginning of the conversation why I wrote this book. One of the reasons is to deconstruct all the myths of the anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish propaganda. There is few. Israel is a colonial state. Israel is a state based on apartheid. Israel is the arrow of Western imperialism, whatever. There is a series of myths which I methodically unbuild, deconstruct. And your followers, the students who follow you, I hope they will find in this book the arrows, the tools, the weapons to reply to this stupid, ignorant, moronic propaganda of the haters. They don't know nothing. They are politically illiterate, most of them.
And so how do we ensure then, to refer to your title, that Israel doesn't stand alone? And do you think that's an accurate representation? We saw that Economist magazine cover, Israel Alone. And then shortly after that, we also saw allies of Israel coming to its aid when they needed to fire at Iranian rockets. So to what extent is Israel truly alone in the world?
You are right. Thanks God, the situation is not desperate. And I think that if we don't, if Israelis, Jews, and genuine non-Jews friends of Israel and of Jews don't surrender, don't give up, don't try to be shy, we can fight this loneliness, because it's still a wavering situation. On one side, in America, for example, it's very clear. You have a big current of public opinion who is not only against Israel, but who just sometimes just wonders why Israel. At the end of the day, why do we waste so much time, devote so much money, so much diplomacy? Why do we get so much headache? Why do we make so much enemies in the area for this tiny country, which is Israel? Why Israel is a question which is really deep in the consciousness of the American people. I saw that long ago when I made a long tour of whole America for a book called American Vertigo. It was the question which I heard more. Okay, we don't know if we like Israel or not, but we just ask why. So we have to reply to this question, why Israel? Why it is important for the geopolitical order, for the symbolic order of the world, for the survival of humanity, that Israel survive. This is the question which is raised. On the other side, you have, of course, some political personalities, and not the least, who say that they are pro-Israel, but all of that is very fragile. What makes me frightened, what made me give this title to this book, is that even when you have a Democratic convention, a Republican convention, where the support to Israel is asserted, I know how fragile all of that is. And I know that you have no political leader who will go for long against the trend, the wave, the current. So this is what has to be reversed, and this has to be done grassroots by in the campuses, by the students, at the level of the young generation, and so on. If not, the last hold the line still, and you have some on the Republican side, on the Democratic side, they will give up at a point.
And you mentioned that you had jumped on a plane immediately after October the 7th and came to Israel. You've been back since. So my question to you is, what's given you hope during that time in the things that you've seen in Israel since October the 7th?
The vibrancy of democracy. The vibrancy of democracy. When you spend time with on Hostage Square, when you spend time in Tel Aviv and in Jerusalem, when you spend time with soldiers of Tzahal, ladies, boys, well-made men, more age, you see that the spirit of Israel, the spirit, the openness, liberalism, democratic concern for the others, and for the other is still here. Is still more vibrant than anywhere. And honestly, what warmed my heart is that I never saw a country under attack in such an incredible, violent way as was Israel on October 7. It was, if you imagine that arriving in France or in America, you can imagine. I'm not sure we would have the same brave, full of cold blood reaction as Israel had, and still standing by its humanist values. This is great.
Well, it's been a pleasure to speak with you, and I know how much we respect and appreciate your voice in the world and your activism. And I know that also if we take on the messages of your book, then Israel truly will not stand alone. And that's something we deeply believe in at Stand With Us. I hope many young people and many people in general will seek out the book and learn the lessons from it. Bernard-Henri Lévy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Profound words. And the book Israel Alone is available to pre-order on Amazon now. And together we'll ensure that Israel is never alone. Together we're stronger. So please take a moment today and consider donating whatever you can to support the vital work of Stand With Us. Head to standwithus.com/donate. Thank you. Now, before we go, a quick video featuring Israeli Paralympic and world champion swimmer Ami Omer Dadaon. He was born with cerebral palsy and already had an impressive record of victories with 7 gold medals at various world championships, 9 gold medals at the European Championships, and secured 2 gold medals and 1 silver at the 2020 Summer Paralympics. And at Paris 2024, the Paralympics, he achieved another remarkable milestone by winning multiple medals, including gold, which is when he joined in heartily as the Hatikva was played. Take a look.
In lane 4, representing Israel, Ami Omer Dadaon.
What an incredible and emotional moment. We're sending love to the Israeli troops and to our brothers and sisters and allies worldwide, and our prayers for every single hostage to be back home with their families soon. Together, we will prevail. Thank you for watching. Am Yisrael Chai.